Welcome to our live feed this morning for 5 top tips for hamstring injury prevention, and we're also going to be doing a little bit of a Q&A towards the end. And me and Caroline are going to be available on the group all day, so people can pop questions below if you're tuning in now, or maybe if you're watching later. Feel free to post and we will check out your questions. So to get started, I'm going to introduce Caroline. So Caroline's here with me today, Stonehenge osteopath. She has been doing this for a long, long time. She has a sports science degree, osteopath degree, worked as a fitness instructor. She's got a martial arts background, and she's also worked with Swindon Town Council Football Club, treated other athletes at an international level, and has her own practice locally here as well. The reason that I know Caroline is that Caroline's been treating me probably for the last past three years of my training, pre-competition, post-competition, all of that kind of stuff. So she's got to know me very well, and also got to know pole dancing quite well as well through treating me and seeing the kind of things that I do with myself and also with my students. So so I'm super excited to have Caroline here today and go through this with you. I think it's a really, really important topic that we needed to cover, and I wanted to have somebody who knows a lot more than I do with me on the feed today to kind of basically advise you guys. We're going to go through top 5 tips that Caroline's chosen. And then there's also the freebie. So there's a free download and a workout to go alongside this Q&A, which is really, really exciting. So you get a video with all the exercises that Caroline's going to refer to, and also a downloadable worksheet to go alongside that. So that'll give you all the information on how to do the exercises and kind of why you're doing the exercises as well, just in case you have forgotten or need to know or want some more information. So yeah, I think we'll get stuck in, if you're happy to get stuck in.
Yeah.
We've also got a friend with us today as well.
Yeah, he's not being rude. I've just got him facing the other way so we can see his back where the hamstrings are. So I thought we'd start with the top 5 tips. As Charlotte said, you've got the free download to have a look at as well. So I won't go too much into exactly what you're going to do or how you're going to do it, but more why you would do these tips. So tip number 1 is I think you need to start with a low back stretch. The importance of this is because the hamstrings come right up into the back of the pelvis. So you can see here, they're up here, and your low back is here. So if we're improving the flexibility here, it just allows movement through the pelvis easier. So the stretch I've recommended for that is something called a lumbar roll or lumbar rotation. And you can see how to do that on the video. And this just allows all the joints in the muscles in the back to be stretched out and help improve general low back flexibility. The next thing on, you're working downwards then, so then you're going to stretch your gluteal muscles or your buttock muscles. A lot of these exercises are about balancing the pelvis so that your hamstrings can work optimally, because often injuries in the hamstring aren't the hamstring's fault. They're often a result of other things going on in the spine and the upper back, the low back, or the pelvis, or lower down in the feet or the ankles that just put the hamstring on under too much demand. So stretching the glutes or the buttock muscles will help balance the pelvis, and you would do a figure of 4 stretch, so you'd be lying on the floor stretching out all this area, all the bottom and a little bit down the side of the thigh. Thirdly, I would encourage a nerve stretch. So the main nerve that supplies the hamstring is the sciatic nerve, and a lot of you have probably heard of sciatica. So if you've had an injury in the past, sometimes the sciatic nerve can get a bit stuck or irritated by any scar tissue in that area and can play a bit of havoc, either meaning you feel quite tight in that area or you get a bit of discomfort down the back of the leg. So the nerve stretch will help improve the movement and the slide of the sciatic nerve through the joints and the soft tissue it passes through, so it should help you lengthen the hamstring when you're stretching, and be a bit more forgiving if you're doing splits and things. Fourth, I promote strength stability and agility exercises. I've kind of lumped them all into one because it's all about much more about the whole body and the lower limbs and the pelvis working all together optimally so that you're developing strength all around the pelvis, the torso, the thighs, front and back, and also encouraging balance and agility in that you can move suddenly in different directions without causing injury. So you'll see those exercises as well on the download. And fifth, finally, is take care of yourself, because a lot of injuries are caused because you're tired, the muscle's tired, you aren't sleeping enough, you maybe not eating the best food, and that you're maybe dehydrated and not consuming enough fluids. So that's probably just the starting point, really, is if you're in good health and well rested, you're less likely to get injuries in the first place, and if you do, you'll recover better. So it's kind of not overtraining one area particularly, and just making sure you take a few minutes every day to make sure you've drunk enough water and looking after yourself and resting properly.
Awesome.
Okay.
So that was great. So that was the 5 top tips, guys. So those are all in the free download as well. There's the recap of those and with all the information that Caroline's just given us as well.
We've also included the
as a bonus.
A bonus. Going back to the balancing of the pelvis, we've also got a stretch in there for the hip flexors, or the psoas, iliopsoas muscle, which is at the front. So it's attached to the lumbar spine and kind of brings the whole pelvis together with the hamstrings and the glutes, and comes down the front of the spine into the front of the thigh.
And it's a lunge, and I love a lunge, so you guys know how excited I am that we've now included that. So that makes me happy too. So we've got a bonus, there is a bonus in there as well. So these are kind of the 5 top tips, but then we've kind of got a bonus stretch in there as well, and there is a picture for you there so that you can check out what that one's all about. So last week when I posted that we were going to be doing this live feed, I finally pinned Caroline down and got her to jump on board with me. When I asked in the group, I basically asked for some pre-asked questions. So we're going to go through those questions now. I'm going to read out a few of them. Obviously, a lot of people will be working at this time, so if anybody asks questions after the live feed, so like later on, please feel free to post below. We're both going to be around to answer those questions as well. So, but for now, we're going to ask the pre-asked ones. There's some really, really good questions asked, guys. Thank you so much for getting involved. So we're going to start with Susie Phillips-Smith. So Susie says, about 1.5 years ago, she injured her hamstring right at the top where it connects to the hip area. She was going into a front split at the end of an hour-long flexibility class, so she should have been pretty warm. And something audibly clicked or popped in her hip or leg, causing her to drop into the split. I actually ended up in a flat split, which had been hovering above the floor previously. It was extremely bad and painful, and it took about 6 months to heal. A year later, something similar happened on her other leg, but luckily she was far more careful and was holding onto her blocks to support herself, so the drop and the subsequent injury was much less. She basically says, her question is there something that she can do to make this less likely to happen again?
Okay, so, so tell me if I go too much in detail. So hamstring injuries are common in a few different sports. For different reasons. So you've got football, rugby and track events, but they're sprinting injuries usually and much lower down the hamstring. Dancers, pole dancers and anybody doing a lot of flexibility, the injury, as Susie says, they tend to experience it much higher up in the hamstring, so it's kind of right up here where the attachment point of the hamstring is. They call that myotendinous injury. The pop is often that you've actually ruptured some of the soft tissue, so some of the tissue has been really, really damaged. And unfortunately, it can take months to get over. I'm glad you're kind of doing better, and saved yourself a little bit from the second injury. So going back to kind of the reason for the 5 top tips, sounds like they would suit you down to the ground, because it doesn't sound like your hamstrings are to blame, because like you said, you'd have been warm and well trained from your hours workout before. It sounds like you probably need to have do some work on your thoracic spine and your lumbar spine to allow your pelvis to move a bit more freely when you're doing the splits. It's hard to demonstrate without somebody doing the splits, but the way the pelvis sits when you do the splits, if there's tightness in the lumbar spine, your pelvis won't rock forward, that's right, isn't it? Forward enough for the movement front and back. So that puts a lot of pressure on the front leg hamstrings. So to answer your question, which is actually that you want to know something you can do to prevent it happening again, would be to address what's going on in the whole body. So look at your lumbar spine, look at your glutes, muscles, definitely your hip flexors, because you need the hip flexors allow that kind of forward rocking of the pelvis, and address the nerve stretch, although it doesn't sound too nervy to me. It sounds much more around what's going on with the pelvis. But yeah, unfortunately 6 months isn't unusual. 3 to 6 months I think they say, with a myotendinous injury and recovery. And also it's being careful when you rehabilitate, because if you've already damaged a hamstring, and it almost doesn't matter which one, you're more likely to damage it again. So it's kind of really taking care back into the rehabilitation, and addressing your body as a whole, not just focusing on stretching the hamstrings, and don't stretch too much too quickly.
So they can kind of use those 5 top tips and those 5 exercises almost to just assess where they're at as well, because they'll be able to feel which one of those they need to do more of. In order to help open up their pelvis and kind of get greater mobility.
I think without going into loads of detail, I think a lot of people doing flexibility related activities will find that hip flexors is a key part of the movement of the pelvis.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So we hope that helps, Susie. Do feel free to post below and let us know if that has helped, or if you've got any additional questions to kind of add on. So moving on to the next one was from Emma J. Emma J's question is about hypermobility. So she says, hello, I'm hypermobile in my knees, so they bend to the side as opposed to the more common bending the opposite way. And I struggle with most hamstring stretches because if I straighten my right leg, I get a lot of pain on the inside of my right knee, or a lot of aching afterwards. So, sorry, I've lost my pace. So therefore, I have to keep it slightly bent, meaning I don't always get stretched through my hamstrings. Are there any stretches that she could do for hamstrings where her legs don't have to be poker straight? And is there anything she needs to make sure that to avoid due to her hypermobility?
Okay, hypermobility is quite a complicated add-in there, because people who are hypermobile, like the ordinary population, generally aren't hypermobile everywhere. So it may be that you are hypermobile in your hips or your lumbar spine or your knees, but that has negative effects in other places. So if you're getting pain on, was it the inside of the knee?
Yeah, on the inside of the knee, yeah.
That probably, as you've identified, is to do with the fact that the hamstrings are tight there, because one attachment, we don't want to know all the details of the attachments, but one of the attachments of the hamstring, apart from starting up here, comes down, one comes on the outside of the knee and the other one comes on the inside. Again, for dancers and people who do a lot of flexibility, it's usually the one on the inside that causes them the problem, because it starts off out here, crosses over the back of the thigh, and then attaches on the inside of the knee. But going back specifically to Emma J, the hypermobility makes it a slightly more complicated answer, because I would want to assess your general range of movement all over your body, because again, it may be that you're quite limited in flexibility in your lumbar spine, so your hamstrings are taking up the slack, and then you're feeling it in your knees. To stretch your hamstrings, you need to be flexing the hip and extending the knee, unfortunately. So you are, to get the full stretch of the hamstring end to end, your legs need to be straight. So that's quite a difficult one to answer without having you stood in front of me and getting you to do bits and pieces, I'm afraid.
So really, to get assessed by a healthcare professional would be, although we're not opting out of answering the question, but with something like that, because there's so many factors going on, it would be better to kind of get advice probably face to face with somebody, with an osteopath.
Yeah, because they'd be able to give you specific exercises. Yeah. Because everybody's individual, and yours might not be the same as somebody else's hypermobility, or probably won't be the same as somebody else's hypermobility. So you need somebody to assess you and work with you in rehabilitating what's going on, and to stop you getting further injuries, especially because of the hypermobility. I hope that's of some help.
Yeah, no, I think that was definitely helpful. Okay, so moving on, we will go on to Ella. Ella said that she was doing a pancake stretch with a partner and was pushed a little bit too far. She felt a tear like Velcro in the uppermost part of the hamstring, which she just said seems very common. It's in that area, like where it connects near the glute. She's 3 months post-injury, and although she's returned to very tentative stretching, she's unsure of what she's doing is easing out the scar tissue, or is she likely to re-injure? She has no idea. She's proceeding really carefully and safely, but she'd love to know the advised protocol in situations like this. So really here, I think for everybody listening, like the advised protocol if you are injured and then getting back from there, the rehab phase.
Okay. Again, you're unfortunately, because of what you do, your high risk is injuring that high part of your hamstring, and that sounds like exactly what you've done. The Velcro or popping that you get is that tendinous junction where I'm pointing to nothing here, but where the muscle blends into the tendon. That's kind of the weak point because the tissue changes. That sounds like that's probably what you've damaged. It's hard without imaging, so ultrasound or MRI, it'd be hard to tell you how much damage you've done. The fact that was it 3 months?
Yes,
now?
3 months, yeah.
Again, as I said earlier to the previous lady, that 3 to 6 months of an injury to that area isn't uncommon. The way rehabilitation happens in especially myotendinous injuries is the first phase, sort of 3 to 7 days, you're doing next to nothing. No stretching, you're resting, icing it, compressing and elevating, taking it easy, and you can do very gentle exercises and pain-free movement. So that might be going for a walk, if you can wait there. So the next phase you'd move on to when you can walk normally with no pain, and you have contraction of that muscle 50 to 70% with no pain, which ideally these tests are done by a professional clinician who'll be able to tell you, right, you're ready to move on, and then would provide you with the next series of exercises. And the other assessment is that you can do a low-speed jog with no pain. So then you move on to phase 2, which is what they call reparative, and that's sort of 6 to 8 weeks. And you're aiming for full range of movement with no pain, but not overstretching. You'd be able to increase your level of exercise. Again, has to be pain-free, because if you want the scar tissue to, I feel like we've got to talk over the rain.
I know, we're just having a massive downpour here, aren't we?
If you're, so the next level of exercise, you must be pain-free. I've lost my train of thought now.
Phase 2.
Oh, because of the scar tissue. Because with scar tissue is useful because it helps the injury heal, but you want the scar tissue to form in the direction of force, which is why you're encouraged to stay relatively active and doing some exercise. But if you overstretch, then you're stretching that scar tissue to beyond what it should, and you're likely to re-injure. Because also the most common time to re-injure is about 2 weeks back into training, full training, after going through rehabilitation. So phase 2, to move on to phase 3, which is remodelling, you're looking at full stretch, full strength and range of movement, and being able to jog backwards with no pain. Again, everything should be with no pain. And then you move into phase 3, remodelling, and that's when you kind of start retraining and pushing it a little bit. But everything you do should not be painful. If you're getting pain, you need to take a step back, do less intensity, or like the easier version of whatever the movement is or the stretch is, so that you are not in pain. Because if you're in pain, you're testing those new tissues, those new fibres, and pain receptors are kicking off and sending messages all over your body and telling your brain something's wrong, and that's when you kind of have a reaction, and that's what you want to avoid.
Okay,
does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Let's.
So basically, ideally, because she was the lady that I think probably, if she's struggling a bit, would be ideal to go and see somebody to get rehabilitation advice in how to get back into exercise. Either somebody who's a specialist in injuries in your field of exercise, so pole dancing if that's what you do, or whatever flexibility it is you do, and get them to assess you, check your current status, and then provide further exercise.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Right, I'm going to try and fit in a couple more. By the way, Susie's just written back to us saying Great, thank you for answering the question.
Okay.
Terry,
Hopefully it helps.
Terry's saying this is incredibly informative and super enjoyable. Thank you. Stephanie's just tuned in. We're just about to answer your question shortly, actually. She says few just made it. So we'll keep cracking on with the questions, guys. So on to Tink.
Great name.
Yeah. So she says she's not sure if it's specifically hamstrings or just splits question, but this is really relevant, so we wanted to answer this question for you. Her open splits and straddle and pancake are great, but her square front splits are terrible. They're not terrible, I've seen her front splits. She says she feels like the nerve from her feet to her upper hamstrings at the area are twanging, which is a technical term, and it just feels so gross. It doesn't feel like a hamstring stretch. Is there anything I can do to stop this feeling and get a hamstring muscle stretch rather than what feels like the nerves? I hope this makes sense.
Okay, that's a great question. As I was saying in the top 5 tips, the sciatic nerve is the long nerve that runs from your lumbar spine through your bottom, down your hamstrings, divides in the back of the calf, and then supplies the back of the calf and your foot. So that's the one you're likely to be feeling twanging. Good term.
Yeah.
So there's a nerve stretch in the download. Give that a try, see if it helps. But what I would want to know is, have you had any kind of injuries to low back of the pelvis, or the hamstrings, or the calf muscle in the past? Because as I've mentioned previously, if you've got any sort of scar tissue, that sort of will cause the sciatic nerve to stick to that soft tissue and can give you that sensation. So ideally you want to be working on nerve stretch exercises in various different directions to try and get that nerve gliding and sliding through the soft tissue, so that your muscle then can work at its full stretch, because the nerve will control really how much stretch you'll get through that muscle, and if the nerve's pulling at that point, you can't do anything else with the muscle without causing yourself pins and needles and things like that. By the way, if you're getting pins and needles or numb feet or anything, please go and see an osteopath or a healthcare professional, because it could be that there's something going on in your back. But often with sciatic problems, they actually start in the back, but you feel all the symptoms further down the leg. So give those 5 exercises, and definitely the hip flexor one as well, the bonus, a try and see if that helps in the short term. And if not, again, it's probably a case of going to get your body assessed and having a look at your posture, how your lumbar spine moves and your pelvis moves, because it might be that the sciatic nerve is sticking somewhere and causing that twanging, but you might find those stretches actually help in the short term.
Cool. So this is really nicely on Stephanie's, and we're going to do this as the last question for now. But like I said, feel free to post below, and we will get back to you. And this kind of leads on with kind of the nervy questions. Stephanie says, I'm not sure which is the root cause for her sciatic pain on her left side for the past couple of years. She's trying to stretch out her hamstrings, but it's been very painful, so she's stopped a little. Sometimes the pain will go away for weeks and then return. Could this be due to weak hip flexors, or is it really her hamstrings? Though she does feel that both her hip flexors and hamstrings are really tight. And then just as an added, her forward bend is quite weak, but she can still touch the floor.
Okay. So, lovely example of quite a complex picture. The sciatica makes that makes the picture complicated, because a lot of the physical stuff about the hip flexors and the hamstrings being tight suggests that the pelvis isn't moving smoothly in whatever movement she's doing.
Okay.
So the thing with sciatica is there's so many different causes of sciatica. It can be, like I said a minute ago, something going on in the back, because this is where the nerve starts. So it might be that you've got a bit of a back issue with flexibility or stiffness, and it's tweaking on the sciatic nerve. So it might be that you're fine for days or weeks because we're also in this conversation kind of left out the whole of your day. You're doing, I'm guessing none of you do this 100% full-time, 5 hours a day training. You're probably in jobs, sat at desks, driving, doing normal everyday things. So you have to allow for those things. So in this case, you may be fine having had a few sessions of a flexibility class where you've stretched your back and you're feeling all nice and warm and flexible, and then you do a week at work, sat at an office desk, in this position, everything shortens, and then you go and stretch on the weekend, and then you think, oh my God, the sciatica's back. It could be as simple as that you're just, because of the occupation, you just need a bit more flexibility during the week. Sorry, I keep talking my hands, there's nothing there. And so, ideally...
They're dancers, they understand. They talk with their body.
So, ideally, you okay, try and keep a long story short. You need to know what the cause of the sciatica is. Have you had a specific diagnosis in the past? Because it can be something quite significant in the lumbar spine affecting the root of the sciatic nerve, or it can be an injury anywhere along the level where the path of the sciatic nerve travels, causing the sciatica. And then you want to think about, when do you feel better and when do you feel worse? Do you notice it after certain activities and not notice it after certain activities? And it might be that it takes 10 hours to recover, so you might feel better the next day. So I'm losing my...
I think
so
really...
The question was to... Because I'm baffling myself now, so...
The question's quite broad. So with regards to sciatica, getting a diagnosis is probably...
is key.
Phase 1. And then phase 2 would be to try out those top 5 tips and see if by working through the pelvis that you can kind of alleviate some of that sciatic pain.
Because that will help with the hip flexibility and what I was saying about the pelvis. So if you can do the 5 top tips, you might find in the short term that actually provides some relief, but not for long term. So again, that's why the diagnosis of the sciatica is useful.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was the question, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was more
Sorry.
about sciatic pain.
I get myself so in depth in what I'm talking about.
Definitely fine though. She'll be tuned in. She's fine.
She's probably laughing. I have no idea what we're talking about. But yeah, so basically, ideally you want to diagnose with sciatica. So if you were stood in front of me talking and I had you as a patient, I would be doing a big case history about what caused, where you've got sciatica, what aggravates it, what makes it feel better, does it affect you on a day-to-day basis, do you sleep okay? And with the aggravating relieving factors, I'd want to know what exercises you do, because obviously stretching sometimes helps and sometimes doesn't. And I'd want to know your history, what you do for an occupation, how much movement you do other than the dancing or the pole dancing or flexibility you do. And then I would treat accordingly. So it might be that it's actually your upper back, lumbar spine that I'm treating, might be all over your body. And then I would be giving you specific exercises to encourage your pelvis to have good smooth movement, flexibility in the lumbar spine, and hip flexors are well stretched, and to keep the mobility and range of movement in your hamstrings. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
If you weren't in Germany, then go and see Caroline.
They've got osteopaths in Germany.
Find someone over there, so find an osteopath over there to help you out. Awesome. We are going to wrap it up, guys. Do not forget that there is a freebie to download, and that is a video of all the exercises that Caroline's been referring to the whole way through, and that were included in the top 5 tips, and also a downloadable worksheet to go alongside that with all the information, so you guys have got those pointers of why you're doing it and how to do it as well. I really, really hope you've enjoyed today. We've spent a lot of time preparing for this, and I can't thank Caroline enough for coming to join us today. It's been really, really informative, and hopefully you've all been able to learn something from the live feed. Don't forget to get your download. The next live feed coming up is going to be next month, and it's going to be one on fueling your body for flexibility with new nutrition and lifestyle factors. It's going to be a really good one as well. I've got another guest coming on board for that too. So I hope to see you guys there. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you've got any questions, we're going to stick around, not like live, but we'll be around on Facebook. So feel free to post below. You can tag us to answer those questions. Thanks very much, guys, and we will speak to you soon.